Welcome back. Well, over the last few weeks, you've seen conversations around the South African National Defence Force and the fact it's been running out of money. All sorts of issues around how our military has not been receiving enough funding over the last, 15 years or so. So then what does this mean for our Navy? Andrew Hendrikse is the Managing Director at Servest Marine. Andrew, good afternoon to you. We know the SANDF hasn't been getting enough money. We have a very long coastline. Does our Navy actually have the resources to protect our coastline properly?
Good afternoon, Stephen. It's good to be with you. I do believe that our Navy needs assistance when it comes to private and public participation in protecting our coastline. And I think when we talk security, I think one must not just think Navy, one must actually think beyond the concept of just a military protective force or policing of our coastlines by government authorities. I think we need to be thinking also in terms of how can we, as a country, protect our coastline using all our resources. And I think that there's a big part to be played coming from the public sector. And I think if I can even take it to a broader level, if I could, and talk the African coast as a whole. If you consider that the African coast, there's 38 African countries that have coastline that makes up the African coast. And if you consider that 90% of all African trade is done by sea into Africa and out of Africa. So there is, when we talk security, it's Navy. Yes, I do agree. We need to have a defence force around the African and South African coast. But then there's also a need for looking at how do we really secure the trade that needs to happen in and out of Africa to ensure economic growth on the continent and in South Africa, as well as the daily livelihoods of all of the continent's people.
So, Andrew, how would that work? I mean, a sort of greater role for the private sector. I mean, what would the private sector actually be doing?
I think there's many ways. I think it can start, and when I talk security, I think beyond just the Navy, as I said earlier. I think port management. I think there's a big need for the private sector to step in and assist government in running efficient and effective ports so that the conduit from sea to land is done effectively and allows for growth. I think that there needs to be investment from the private sector in ports. I think that the TMPA has highlighted this very recently, actually in the last couple of days, is that they're saying, yes, we do not have the funds to develop the Port of Durban. We do need to have a bigger export ability out of that port, but it's going to take, they need private investment, private companies to come in and be willing to participate. And this is actually a new term because this is not something we've heard before. So I think it's a good thing to hear that actually that the Departments of Transport and government are saying, yes, we want the private sector to come in now and step in where we can't actually do it.
Okay, I mean, there are various things that we're looking at here. So you don't see a role for the private sector in working with the Navy necessarily. It'll probably be a step too far for many people.
I do. I think that there are opportunities, for example, in shipbuilding. So you could actually have a vibrant market, a vibrant industry where we're doing shipbuilding for our Navy as opposed to having vessels imported, having them built locally. It's been fairly successful when it comes to the tugs in various ports that have been built locally. I think there's also vessel management as well, where where private sector can step in and assist to manage ports. That's actually been quite effectively done over the years when it came to the Department of Forestry and Fisheries and Environment, where the fleet of vessels that patrol the fishing grounds were being managed privately. That changed in recent years, and SAMHSA took over that role. But I think it's something that we can reconsider, and I think that's a very good area where we could be involved with patrolling the coastline. And also, there's currently a tender out for replacements of the old fleet of emergency towing vessels that South Africa built back in the 70s. And this once again is another area where private sector can be involved in protecting our coasts from vessels that might be have lost engine power or in bad weather, inclement weather, and at the risk of running aground or sinking. We can actually have companies, local companies, running those vessels, managing those vessels as well. And then also as far as crewing goes and training of crewing, that is also something that can be done by the private sector.
There are other issues to all of this, obviously, and I mean, you point out about working with other countries in Africa. So for us, I mean, it's sort of Namibia on one side, Mozambique on the other. I imagine we have pretty good relationships with the various militaries anyway. I mean, some of our soldiers are fighting in Cabo Delgado, and I'm reminded that Britain and France are building an aircraft carrier together that they would share.
Exactly. Now, if you quite recently, Vice Admiral Monde Lobeso, the Chief of the Navy, actually spoke to this, and he mentioned and he reiterated the commitments that African countries have, and those particularly around us, which we do relate with on an ongoing basis. We'll be part of this, and that's the 2050 AIM strategy, which is your African Integrated Maritime Strategy, and also the SIMSA concept, which is your combined exclusive maritime zone of Africa. And these are where there will be collaboration in order to create security around in the African coastline, the African waters, to combat piracy, to ensure that IUU is properly carried out, which is the control of illegal and unregistered and unreported fishing and other harvesting of other natural resources from our waters. And these are all areas that could be done jointly with neighboring countries and the rest of the continent as well.
Andrew Hendrikse, thank you, Managing Director at Servest Marine. Really appreciate the time today.